Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of Psyche Sci on the Fly. I'm your host Kaden and Abbey, and today we're going to be touching upon a very sensitive topic that comes up many times in behavioral neuroscience: hormones and neurotransmitters. Very aware that this is coming after the exam season, but we thought why not keep you in touch with a little bit of school material during the summer semester. So first off, we have Abby talking about hormones.
Hormones are produced by endocrine glands and carried through the bloodstream. You may be familiar with the hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal glands from previous psych classes. You may also heard of the adrenal gland, pancreas, thyroid gland, ovaries, testes, which are also key hormone producers. Similar to neurotransmitters, there are different classes of hormones. These classes depend on a hormone's chemical structure, which affects its mechanisms of action. For example, the steroid class includes hormones which can enter their target cell and interact with receptors within it. They have a similar structure to cholesterol, which is a type of lipid. This structure allows the molecule to pass through the phospholipid bilayer of a cell. Some hormones, like proteins, cannot enter the cell and rather interact with receptors on the surface. An important job of hormones is to regulate homeostasis in the body. The pancreas detects blood glucose levels and releases insulin when glucose is high. It also releases glucagon when glucose is low. These hormones travel from the pancreas to their target cells in the liver and muscles, where glucose can either be placed into storage or taken out and repackaged for use. Now Kaden's going to tell you a little bit about neurotransmitters.
So neurotransmitters are a bit different from hormones for the reasons that they are not produced by glands nor carried through the bloodstream. They are actually produced by our nerves and allow our nerves to communicate with each other. There are a variety of different neurotransmitters that all provide their own respective functions. Some excitatory, for example, glutamate as the primary neuronal exciter, dopamine for learning, noradrenaline for arousal, attention and stress, the list goes on and on and on. On the other hand, there's also inhibitory, for example, serotonin for mood, sleep, and sexual desire. GABA as an overall reducer of neuronal excitability as to maintain homeostasis and balance in the nervous system. Overall, neurotransmitters, along with hormones, provide fundamentals for the functioning of our bodies. Diseases can be caused by increases and decreases in neurotransmitters. For example, Parkinson's disease, a disease in which controlled movement is difficult, is mainly due to a lack of dopamine. Alzheimer's disease is mainly due to too much excitation from glutamate. Drugs also work on our perception by blocking or promoting neurotransmitter release. MDMA, or Molly, as most of us may know it, feelings work by promoting the release of serotonin and dopamine. Now that we have a good overview of what hormones and neurotransmitters each do in their respective roles, in this episode we'll be explaining an interesting phenomenon in which neurotransmitters and hormones come together to make us feel hungry when consuming marijuana. The two main methods of doing this are just inhalation and ingestion. But if THC is ingested, it travels to the liver where most of it is eliminated or metabolized. These molecules travel through the bloodstream and pass through the blood-brain barrier to reach the brain. On the other hand, if THC is inhaled, so for example, like you smoke it, its metabolites enter in the bloodstream quickly through the lung and are transported to a brain in a similar fashion. So THC in general can bind to G protein-coupled cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2 present in the body. CB1 receptors are particularly abundant in the frontal cortex, hippocampus, basal ganglia, hypothalamus, various different brain structures. CB1 is most abundantly found on cells, and so it's not exactly various different brain structures, it's found on cells of the immune system, blood cells, and glial cells, so it's a lot more general. In this episode, we'll be focusing on CB1 receptors in particular in the hypothalamus, which are critical for regulating food intake. So hypothalamic POMC neurons, which, the only thing you really need to know about them is that they promote satiety. Basically this, and satiety basically means being satisfied by eating. The hormones leptin and ghrelin are within these neurons, and they influence the neurons oppositely. So these neurons are activated by leptin, but they're also going to be inhibited by ghrelin. And so this leads to a dramatic increase in food intake with the presence of ghrelin. And so both these various different molecules or various different signals will compete for an interaction with the POC neurons within the hypothalamus.
A 2015 study published in Nature looked at the effects of marijuana on hypothalamic neurons and appetite. Based off of what we just learned about the POMC neurons in the hypothalamus and their role in food intake, Kaden, what do you think would happen to the appetite of these mice that they injected this into when the cannabinoids and the THC interacted with the POMC neurons?
I believe that the cannabinoids in the drug would bind to the POMC neurons and make them fire less, and that would then prevent you from feeling full.
Right, so that's what they thought, but when they injected the cannabinoids into the mice, the drug turned off adjacent cells that normally command the POMC neurons to slow down, which made those neurons even more active. And at the same time, the cannabinoids activated a receptor inside the POMC neuron that caused the cell to switch to releasing endorphins. And you guys listening may be familiar with endorphins as a pain-relieving neurotransmitter, also called endogenous morphine. But endorphins can also release when you do other pleasurable activities like eating, exercising, and sex. Beta endorphins build up during food deprivation, which makes eating more rewarding when you're hungry.
So overall, these hypothalamus POMC neurons, they actually stop firing the neurotransmitters that they're supposed to be firing, and when they receive the cannabinoids and they start firing endorphins?
Right. If endorphins are being released without any signals of hunger, then a runaway effect occurs. It's also worth mentioning that all signaling molecules involved in hunger influence dopamine neuron activity too.
Okay, so we know how THC interacts with the hypothalamus. Are there other brain structures that may be involved with this increased appetite?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, apart from the hypothalamus, THC seems to have a prominent effect on the olfactory bulb too. Giovanni Marsicano and his team at the University of Bordeaux tested the effects of THC on mice too. They found that THC fit into receptors on the mice's olfactory bulb, which increased their ability to smell food and lead them to eat more of it. They exposed the mice to banana and almond oils to test their scent sensitivity. The control group sniffed the oils extensively at first, and then eventually habituated to the scent and stopped showing interest. But the experimental group, which had been dosed with THC, kept on sniffing when the others stopped. These THC-dosed mice also showed an increased appetite. The brain has its own built-in satiety mechanisms that help to regulate how much we eat. But what happens when these are hijacked?
It's interesting because you don't have conscious control over how hungry you are. You can't just say one day, man, today I don't really feel like being hungry, which is, especially apparent with some people with diseases like particular gene mutations, like those involved with the Prader-Willi syndrome. These people with these syndrome, they don't have the mechanism that will tell you to stop eating, and so they will just keep on eating until most likely they will die. And so the satiety mechanism can be triggered when food or water is ingested, even before the actual nutrients get to your cells. And this highlights the role of our body's inside system that receives signals about the conditions within your body. Like, for example, just the swelling of the stomach, so just various visceral signals, can slightly reduce hunger. However, in this episode and in many lab studies before it, we have seen that our built-in mechanisms can indeed be hijacked.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about hormones and neurotransmitters is that they operate in distinct pathways. Their structure affects how they move and where they can attach, which ultimately determines their functions. It's better to describe endorphins, for example, by the pathways that they share with other chemicals, rather than by their prescribed functions. When you understand where these chemicals are acting in your body, particularly your brain, you can see how they can have these effects on your behavior. For example, beta endorphins also have a role in perceiving pain. In the central nervous system, beta endorphins bind mu-opioid receptors and inhibit the release of GABA, an inhibitory neurotransmitter, which results in excess production of dopamine.
And dopamine is associated with pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. This makes sense evolutionarily because relieving pain should elicit a pleasurable response from the body to keep us out of danger and avoid pain. These mu-opioid receptors are most abundant in pain control circuits, including the amygdala and other major structures involved in pain.
All right, very interesting. Thank you very much, Abby. So as the evidence suggests, neurotransmitters and hormones are the main molecules orchestrating our behavior and bodily needs. Although very different, there are indeed processes in which the two work in tandem. Hopefully you understand a bit more about their pathways in the brain and how just one substance can affect your body unconsciously in numerous ways. All in all, just be careful what you take, as you might not be consciously aware of their effects. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.